obviously our garden is a game of two halves almost, with a large open area with the daisies and all the herbaceous, which is nice and sunny. And then we move into lovely woodland gardens. This sort of takes us there. This is
an opinion divider.
Yeah. Persicaria painter's palette.
Oh.
We create two large drifts of this on either side of the path, and it's just a lovely foil for other things.
He uses the term we. Ross created two large drifts of this.
I like it's a royal we when Helen needs something doing, and when I actually do something, it's just me.
Hello and welcome to episode 98 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking all sort of burnished in an autumnal burnt orange, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And over in Cambridgeshire on this soggy day, because we had a deluge yesterday, we have the ever-smiling Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson looking absolutely blooming.
And, you know, I'm delighted we brought middle names into the conversation at the very beginning of this podcast, because I think our guest today, welcomed back to the podcast for, I think, his third appearance, has some of the best middle names of anybody to appear on Talking Dirty. Joe Lawrence Leplay, Sharman of Monksilver Nursery, down the road from me in Cambridgeshire. Welcome back to Talking Dirty.
You.
In a very
I'm already looking very Christmassy.
Yeah.
I don't have the autumn russets on. I've got the Christmas on.
Very fine, fair isle jumper. I'm impressed. Now, one of the reasons we've invited you back is this is, despite the fact that a lot of those big summer fairs are over, a slightly busy season for you because the specialist autumn snowdrop fairs are on, and you've been, you know, getting all of those excited galanthophiles snaffling up the autumn snowdrops, which I'm sure everyone watching or listening to a podcast like this knows about. But snowdrops are certainly not just for one time of year.
No, well, with me, they start in September, so the middle of September. So I get a peak of flowering at that point in time. And then I get a slight lull. I'm going through into October, November with slightly less varieties, but still flowers coming. There's a slight, again, sort of slower period over Christmas with a few varieties, Remember, and Three Ships and Early to Rise. There's a whole series that come through until you get through to the main season, which then starts probably about mid-January. And then you go through this massive peak in February, a few flower into March, and one or two, just very, very one or two, will still have flowers on in April.
We just closed our garden to the public, and it was very funny because one of our visitors came up to me on the last day and she said, I've never seen so much colour in the garden. This is ridiculous. We've had this dreadful period of drought throughout the summer. You know, everybody said there's going to be no autumn colour. There's masses of colour. How do you do it? But there's one thing I just want to say. Snowdrops?
Yeah. Come on. You need to invest in a few autumn ones.
I have. I've got 4 or 5 autumn flowering varieties.
Yeah, well
and I mean, you know, they suddenly appear from nowhere because they've been under shrubs and things that are losing their leaves, and suddenly there you are. There they are. And you have this wonderful surprise that, in actual fact, just as you thought everything was going to be brown and dull and dead, there they are.
It's amazing. And I agree with you. This autumn has been marvellous for the number of things that are still in flower, things that they took a little pause when it got very dry, and now they're having another go. And I've even seen a horse chestnut in full flower, and also hawthorn in full flower. And I've got all sorts of things which are still in flower. And this mild weather this week is going to keep them in flower a bit longer, because quite often it's the frost that takes the flowers off, and also knocks those last few leaves off. And this mild weather now is keeping it all going, and it's all holding steady. And there are snowdrops in the autumn, of course, but there are lots and lots of other things, which is what Thordis wanted to talk about.
Well, yes. So for anyone who thinks this is about to turn into a complete Galanthus special, don't worry. We want to touch on autumn snowdrops because we're plant obsessed, but there's a whole lot of colour coming up as well. And I had a sneak peek at some of the things Joe had lined up. So I'm very excited for show and tell today. But before we move away from autumn snowdrops, and I don't know if you've brought any along because it is probably you have. I suppose the thing that's different. Oh, he's disappeared to get a snowdrop. Oh, here they come. The thing that's different is we get used to in sort of the late winter into spring, the various different types. So, you know, all the different breeding that goes on between different groups. But in autumn it is slightly less varied. Would I be right in saying?
Yes, I think it's less varied because you're only working within one species, and it's very, very difficult to get hybrids between the one that there is. Now, there's one or two early Galanthus elwesi which have been used. So the one that most people will know is Galanthus Autumn Beauty, but there is another one that's widely available. And then people have been freezing pollen of the autumn ones and putting it onto the spring ones, try and push the flowering season a bit earlier, and they are succeeding. And then I'm trying to use these very early elwes varieties to cross in, and gradually, the flowering time is getting earlier and earlier. And they're nearly all reginae-olgae crossed with elwesi, because those are the two earliest species.
Where does reginae-olgae come from?
Well, in the wild, it's got quite a big distribution, in fact. So you'll find it along the west coast of Greece, all the way down to the Peloponnese. And then, so the forms that were known also in Corfu. So the forms that were known as, Cambridge or Rachelae or Octobrensis all come from that part of the world, Corfu and that western coast of Greece. But when you move down into the Peloponnese, which is also part of Greece, a big peninsula that is south of mainland Greece, then there you start finding, as you go further and further down, the snowdrops flower earlier and earlier and earlier, because they've had to adapt to climate change over the last 6,000 years. So they've moved their flowering times to be earlier. And there you'll find slightly more graceful, more delicate forms that flower in September. So this is why the bulk, like the one that's most known is Cambridge, which is obviously one of the sort of Corfu or Western Greece ones.
So which ones have you brought along today?
I got a selection. So I've got some which are those larger Western coast Greek ones. I've got a hybrid, which is a reginae-olgae crossed an elwes, which was done, the one called Autumn Beauty, that was done by someone else. And then I've got one or two pure reginae-olgae. So reginae-olgae is named for Queen Olga. That's where the reginae-olgae comes from. And Queen Olga of Greece, of course. And it was only named in 1926. It was named quite late because there was quite a lot of confusion about its identity in the early days.
Oh, wow. Well, show us. We want to see Autumn Snowdrop #1.
Okay. So one of the leading lights in Autumn Snowdrops is a man called Melvyn Jope. And this is one that is named for him, with extremely large flowers. This isn't the first early, it's a slightly second early one. So this will be flower, as you can see, it's flowering now. So we're end of October, beginning of November. And then, so this is called Melvyn Jope. Then there's another one here, and you probably will not be able to see this. You can see that it's much smaller, and I don't know whether you can see that it's a slightly greeny colour, because the camera don't always. You can.
Yeah, there's a real kind of fluorescent hue coming across.
There's a kind of greeny, yellowy hue to this, and this one is called Adamite, and Adamite is a green mineral. And then we have.
Run out, grab a snowdrop, run back in.
Back in. So this is one of the part of the early group again, and this variety, if that's in focus, is called Ruby Baker. It has big green tips and green markings on it, and this is the last flower on that very early September group. So this is really it now, because they've all gone over. Then the one that I've got here, which is the hybrid. This hybrid is a cross between Galanthus elwesi and Galanthus reginae-olgae, and it was done by a guy who doesn't live too far away from me, south of Huntingdon. And he went to his garden centre and realised there were some elwesi flowering very early. And he saw the possibilities, and then he started to cross. So then he's created Autumn Beauty, and there's another one. I can't remember, Autumn something. Do you know that one, Alan?
No, I don't. Is that Autumn Beauty that you've got there?
This is Autumn Beauty that I have here, yes.
It's a lovely big clump.
Good. Yeah, it's fantastic. And you can see in the leaves that it's clearly a hybrid, very, very vigorous, and deservedly a good plant. I don't know whether it's PBR or not, it might be, but it's certainly been marketed in a proper way and is available in lots of places. So that's Autumn Beauty. And then the other one I've got here, about the ones that are from should we say the center of the Peloponnese being slightly smaller and slightly earlier. So if we look at something like going back to Melvyn Jope again, if you look at Melvyn Jope, you can see what kind of size he is here. And when you start going to this western coast of mainland Greece and into Corfu, then you suddenly start finding that they're much, much bigger.
It's enormous.
It's enormous. So this is another selection by, this is named for Melvyn, but this one here is a selection made by Melvyn, which is called Tessera, with huge flowers on very tall stems, and can have either 3 or 4 petals on every flower. So it's quite showy. It's much more showy than a normal variety would be because it's got those extra petals in the flower, and you can see the height difference is really quite remarkable.
Yeah, how tall is that taller one?
Oh, it's nearly a foot tall. Yeah, and this is the difference between Corfu and Western Greece, and then the main Taygetos mountains with these slightly smaller but very early ones. Right, so you are right. The variation is limited. The one I can't show you, which I would love to show you, but they've all finished, is the one that's called Pink Panther, and it is remarkably pink. And me being me, I've actually crossed it onto itself and then back crossed again to get one that's even more pink. And it's so pink that the green mark looks brown. So whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage, I don't know. But you know,
who gives a damn? We just love pink.
Yeah, I know that's for others to judge. It's for others to judge. But you know, I keep working away, creating all these parts, and I shall keep going for as long as I can. Right, so I didn't bring that many snowdrops. It was just enough to put the flavour in the article.
To whet our appetite. I mean, Alan, I've seen you scribbling them down. I know you have got your sort of 5 or so varieties of autumn snowdrops at East Ruston, but are you building up? I mean, we haven't got to Flomo yet, but are you building up a bit of a wish list?
Yes, I am. I'd like to have Autumn Beauty, and I would like to have Tessera because that's very large.
I thought you'd like that.
And I'd like Melvyn
everything.
Jones as well. And Ruby Baker I don't have because she's very early. So I'd like all of those. They would be wonderful. So if you put those on an order for me, Joe, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, we'll obviously double the price because it's Alan.
I love that this is like Alan's sort of personal shopper experience.
Well, yes, but you know, well, of course, what's the whole point of this podcast? It's Alan can talk to people and do his own shopping from home without actually having to go anywhere. He can just write these little lists out. But he knows, because he knows me, that I'm actually writing them all down as well.
Yes.
Yes. So you know that I'm making a list.
Ever the businessman. Right. So autumn snowdrops, obviously something you as Mr. Snowdrop are associated with. But actually one of the plants I associate most with you are chrysanthemums. And it's a great joy to see such a wide range at your nursery because, you know, we always talk about the fact that chrysanthemums fall out of fashion and garage forecourt flowers, etc. It's very disappointing because hardy chrysanthemums in particular are such wonderful garden plants, and I know I don't need to tell you that because you're obviously a huge fan of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all start by driving around and seeing the cottage garden varieties that are still there, that have survived everything, every winter that was thrown at them, everything that could possibly happen, they've stood up to. But you have to remember that chrysanthemums were when they were first introduced, they were introduced as show flowers. They weren't really designed to go in the garden at all. And most of the ones that came through as show flowers are enormous flowers, but not really designed to grow outdoors in this country. So they weren't very hardy. And it wasn't until people introduced a species called yezoense into gardens that was totally hardy, that plant could then start crossing with other varieties that were here to produce the first hardy strain, which was called the rubellums. And the rubellums were very tall, single-flowered. And as people went through, as time went by, people started crossing back and back again on these rubellums, and they ended up with a group that is called, and I'm going to tell you about this in a minute, they're called the Koreans. They were starting to cross back into that. So they got, again, a much better range of characters. That's a fully double and lots more colours, but slightly less hardy. But the whole group, the whole subject of the groups of rubellums and Koreans and all of these groups is really such a mess. If you actually start looking through at which group each different plant is put into, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But instead of looking at that, you want to know when you buy it, is it hardy? Will it grow under my conditions? Will it flop? Important character, because most of the ones that we selected, we've gone through the range of varieties that possible. We're looking for hardiness, we're looking for uprightness, we're looking for dramatic color range, and we don't want it to fall over. So do you want to see a few or not?
Yes.
Okay, well, the highlight, the one that everybody is going mad for, is one that I picked up a few years ago. in Germany at a plant fair when I was legally allowed to buy these things. And this one is called Etna. And it has the most amazing colour because each petal is red with a yellow tip. And as the flower grows, the yellow tip gets longer and you end up with a flower that is really half and half red and yellow. And I don't know any other hardy chrysanthemum that has got that pattern. It's the most amazing pattern. And unsurprisingly, it sells like hotcakes. And Alan, do you have this one?
No, but I'd like it, please.
Okay, well, here, you take this one. And I'll go and
Thank
get
you very
another
much.
one. So, really, it's the most amazing new variety. We very fortunately, I think, are the first people to be selling it because I managed to get it out of the EU before everything closed down. So that's Etna, so Chrysanthemum Etna.
And it's even more beautiful in real life, if that's possible. I mean, it really catches your eye across the nursery.
Now, I would say that Etna for me is not as hardy as some. Another one we'll deal with quickly next is one called Ruby Mound. And Ruby Mound has got the most amazing, rich, dark red flowers. They're stunning flowers. And received opinion is that this is not hardy because it's more closely related to the Koreans or to some of the greenhouse ones. The greenhouse ones are still not hardy, by the way. So you can actually take a bunch of plants that you bought in a supermarket and you can root the stems, you can grow the plants, but they're really not hardy. Anyway, Ruby Mound, for me and for others, has proved to be completely hardy. So whether that's just climate change or whether that the people somebody had a bad experience and lost it and then it went round being labelled as not hardy, I don't know. But for me, it's totally hardy. It's taller than Etna. Etna will be probably anything up to 2.5 feet, so that's 75 centimetres. Ruby Mound will be 75 to 90, so it will be a bit taller when it gets established. Always got these very fresh leaves, the fresh green leaf, which is actually quite a good contrast to the flower. There's some
I
have
just
got a
want to say one thing, Joe, that you managed to keep your plants looking very good at the bottom. Now, an awful lot of people, when you go and buy chrysanthemums like this at this time of the year, in a small pot like that, you will find that the bottom leaves are shriveled and dried and looking.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why that is. I'll tell you why that is. Yeah. That is because most stocks of chrysanthemum that you can buy have got eelworm.
Right.
And the eelworm grows up, it travels its way up the stem, and it kills off the leaves one by one as you go up the stem. So as you go up the stems, the leaves are dying off at the bottom. So that's factor number one. Factor number two is if they're shaded at the bottom, then they will also, the lower leaves will die off because they're not getting enough light.
Yep.
So there's two factors there. Now, I'm not claiming that I don't have eelworm. I do. But the point is that on a nursery, it's always far worse than it is in your garden, because in your garden, you're not watering every second day or even twice a day as we had to in the summer. You're barely watering at all. So the opportunity for that nematode to crawl up the stem is far, far reduced. So you see a pot-grown chrysanthemum, often no leaves. And I'm not saying I don't have it. I do have it. But I'm just saying when you plant it, it won't be such a problem for you as it is for me because of my conditions and how I grow things. So so yes, it is right that you end up with this full stem with just 3 flowers at the top. I agree with you. Yeah, and you obviously sell them as well, don't you? So you're selling them through the plant centre.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to educate people that there is life after September in our gardens, and chrysanthemums are an ideal way to do that. Yeah. For instance, I mean, I'm digressing slightly because there is one branch of chrysanthemums that people train in the most bizarre ways. They make waterfalls and all the rest of it. We all know about that and how difficult it is to do and everything else. But when it's done well, it looks fantastic. But I had a little bit of an accident here in the garden because I had a plant of the variety called Emperor of China, which is probably one of the last ones to flower, with pink petals, 2-tone pink petals, slightly spoon-shaped on the end. You've got it there. I knew he
definitely has it on the nursery.
Yeah.
And he has it to hand.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the one. Yeah. But the wonderful thing about this is that sometimes when the weather gets cold enough, the leaves just below the flowers turn this wonderful color of beetroot red. Yeah. Now, I had a gangly specimen of this planted in a raised bed, and it flopped forward. And it flopped forward and made this wonderful sort of waterfall of ruby red foliage, and then the flowers on the end. And I just thought it was lovely. Absolutely. That's it.
There we go. We can see one of the leaves.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that people don't really. People always associate autumn colour with trees and shrubs, but
Yeah.
herbaceous plants do the most wonderful autumn colour as well. And so there's rich yellows, there's rich reds. If you just hang on a second. I know we're diverting away from chrysanthemums, but this is an Oenothera. I mean, that's amazing. It's a Oenothera. Sometimes it's called fruticosa. It's a variety called Erica robin, but it's got the most glorious autumn colour. And there's some of the astilbes and aruncus have got good colour. And then obviously there's lots and lots of grasses. You can see here, this is Panicum virgatum variety with the most superb autumn colour. And people, you need to think about these things because they will go on looking good. It's not just about the flower; it's about the leaves and how the leaves look in your garden.
I think what you're talking about was brought home to me big time when we went to Chelsea Flower Show in October 2 years ago, whenever it was. And one of the show gardens there used a plant called Amsonia. And they didn't use it for its milky blue flowers. They used it for its butter yellow leaves.
Absolutely.
And I remember Thordis and I looking at that. And I mean, it was absolutely stupendous.
Yeah. And I'm so excited because I've got one in my garden for the first time and it's all buttery yellow. And it's every time I open my front gate, it's there.
And the other thing about Amsonia, when it's like that, it picks so well. I mean, you can pick pieces of it and put it in a bunch and bring it into the house. It doesn't drop. It has a good vase life.
That's the thing. It's about things that don't drop their leaves. So, lots of plants, I mean, Aster, for instance, often goes a good yellow colour. Yeah. But the leaves then shrivel fairly quickly after you've picked them. Whereas something like Amsonia, those leaves hang on. They stay good, don't they?
Yeah.
And just to go back to that plant that's to your left, because we didn't quite
Oenothera.
Yeah, I mean that's really beautiful. We didn't quite catch its name properly.
It's Oenothera fruticosa, and it's a variety called Erica robin.
How do you spell Oenothera?
O-E.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So it's an evening primrose.
Evening primrose, and it was actually selected not for its autumn colour, not for its flowers, but for the most amazing spring foliage, because in the spring, the foliage is a brilliant yellowy orange colour, quite unlike any other plant. It's the most amazing spring foliage. That's what it was selected for and named Erica robin. But Erica robin, she's the daughter of John and B. Newbold, but that's by the by. So they selected it for the spring foliage colour. And then it will also have, if you like, a good rich yellow, which, if you're Christopher Lloyd, that's fine. It also has the most amazing rich yellow flowers and then this incredible autumn colour. So it's a really, really good plant. All seasons, except for the depth of winter. There's something going on. 3 seasons of the year. Really, a very good.
Well, that's going to make most fun. If somebody had the courage, if you like, to actually propagate that and make enough of it. I mean, it could make a wonderful spring bedding with brown-coloured tulips or something, whatever whatever you want. I mean, it'd be absolutely fantastic.
How many would you like?
300, please.
Okay, no problem. No problem. I'll have that for next week.
Now that's very exciting.
That could go on my list, please, Joe.
I've put it on your list. Don't worry. You can't see my hand. I'm writing furiously under here.
And actually, it looks lovely with ruby mound. That Oenothera, however we're saying it.
We want to put those together.
That's
we can do that.
Rather nice. The foliage.
It is. Yeah. Well spotted, Thordis.
I'm feeling covetous.
Okay, but your garden's too small. So, you'll have to. I'll tell you what you'll have to do. You'll have to do what a lot of people do is you'll have to do somebody else's garden who isn't very interested and sort of plant a whole load of stuff in someone else's garden or on your allotment.
Well, yes, there may well be rows of chrysanthemums on the allotment at this rate.
Very well. Right, so 1 or 2 other varieties I've got here. So one of my favourites, and possibly unsurprisingly, this variety is called Esther, and it starts flowering in July. So it's flowering for me from July.
But the flowers are not that colour in July.
No, they're not. They change colour as the season goes, which is really quite interesting. So earlier in the season, they're slightly more bronzy colours, and then they change through and become pinker and pinker as they go on. And if you're prepared to deadhead or do what I'm going to call the May chop, as opposed to the Chelsea chop, if you're prepared to do that on some of your plants, then you can get a very long flower season. And so what we do is we cut them back, we split some late, we pot them late. We're doing all sorts of things, and by doing this, we can have them in flower from July to October. So it's the most amazing season. And the only other one I know that flowers for that length of time and so well is
Dixter orange.
perfect orange, which is just remarkable for the length of time that it will flower. It's a really amazing colour. I don't know, Alan, whether you've had one that sometimes you get the odd flower that starts yellow and you think, oh, I've got something new here. I've got a yellow one.
No, I
and
haven't
then
had
you
that.
grow it on, and then it just goes back to being orange again. Orange is absolutely stunning. It's really, really good. It stands up well in the garden. Esther stands up well. And Esther is a case in point where the classification doesn't make any sense, because this variety is put down as a Korean, but I raised it by collecting seeds from only rubellums. So, how can it suddenly, become a Korean if its parents were rubellums?
And just to go back into this Korean thing, because the origins of chrysanthemums are Southeast Asia.
Yeah, Japan, China, Korea. There's different species all around that part of the world. But generally, because Korea is sort of further north, you can assume that things are slightly hardier from there. So the first plants that came through would all have come through from Japan, where the climate, except in the north of Japan, where it's very cold, the climate is much warmer than here. So you're dealing with plants that were grown in warm climates. And these amazing sculpture ones that Alan was talking about, you can do that because the climate's warmer. They are almost semi-shrubby and they go on growing. Now, chrysanthemums only flower with short day length. So if you can get them growing in the spring and you start pruning and pruning and pruning in the spring while the day length is increasing, then you can make the most amazing tortured sculptures should you wish. But as soon as the day length starts getting shorter, then they will move into flowering mode. So another way to do is to cheat with these amazing sculptures and keep them in the greenhouse where they've always got long days. And then you can make them whatever shape you want. And you've got a longer season to do it. And then you take them out of the greenhouse and you put them outside in natural day length, and they will instantly start moving into flower mode.
Joe, can I just ask a question? Because what intrigues me is lots of plants we do chuck back midway through the season, the growing season. For instance, I do it with phlox, I do it with sedums or hylotelephiums, and various other plants as and when. Heleniums is another one. If you were going to do the same thing, if a gardener is growing outside chrysanthemums in their gardens, in their borders, and they want to chop them back, to probably, if they're very tall, to lessen their height, maybe. What is the optimum time to do that, considering that they flower late?
It's really interesting, because although we call it the Chelsea chop and most herbaceous perennials will be chopped in May, if you actually look at the growth pattern of the plant, there are some things that you can chop far later and they will still do the same trick. There's a group of plants which you have to do in May, but we still do some in July. So I will do things like gaura in July. I will chop them back and get them to flush up again. And heliopsis. There's one or two other things that you can successfully do quite late. Now, the early group, the May group, if you cut them too late, like aster or phlox, if you cut your aster or phlox in July, you end up with a squinny little rubbish shoots which don't really make anything. So it's looking at the plant and judging the timing for that individual plant. And the other thing I would say about the chopping them back at this time is don't chop your whole plant. So the ones that you chop will flower about 2 weeks later than the ones that you didn't chop. So you need to work out, do I want the taller, earlier ones at the back or at the front? So then you can either chop the back of the plant or you can chop the front of the plant. And then you'll get the long season actually on the same clump by only shortening some of the stems.
I do this with a phlox that came from my grandmother's garden, no name on it at all. Tall mauve phlox. I cut, let's just say, every other shoot back. It's not every other shoot, but and so the ones that I leave flower first, then the ones that I've chopped flower. And if I'm really diligent and I deadhead the ones that have flowered first, I get three lots of flowering.
Yeah. Absolutely, and things like lobelia, the Lobelia cardinalis speciosa group, once they finish flowering, if you just take the flower spike off, then they will branch and flower again. And the same is true with a lot of verbascums. If you don't cut the whole stem off, you just cut the flower head off, where the flower go down to the first real leaf on that stem, then they will branch and sprout again, particularly on the hybrid ones like Christo's Yellow Lightning and one or two other ones which are hybrid. They will always repeat flower, but just take the flowers off. Don't cut the whole stem off. So it's sort of learning each plant individually and working out what to do. But lobelia is classic. We always cut them down. In fact, sometimes because I want to time the flowering for an event, I'll actually cut them down while they're in full flower to push them into making shoots, which will then flower in time for an event that I'm doing. And the same is true with the gaura.
Can I just ask you the bottom line? When do you cut back chrysanthemums?
If I'm going to cut back chrysanthemums, then I want to do it before the day length changes.
Yeah.
And this is why the May-June period.
So before the longest day.
Yeah, because they are day length sensitive. So if you do any cutting you do, you want them to grow a bit before that day length change and then go to flower. So if you cut them after the 21st of June, they're just going to go straight to flower. So you cut them a month or so before, so they've got time to flush up with more leaves and more shoots, and then they go into flower. You get the maximum amount of flower. If it's not so day length sensitive, the ones that aren't so day length sensitive are the ones that you can cut later. But you do need to know your plants to know what you can cut when. So
for instance, Esther and Dixter Orange, which start to flower earlier and are obviously not day length sensitive like lots of the others are, you can cut them earlier or later.
Well, because I'm trying to get a whole balance of flowering for the whole season, we do some and some. So we'll do some in May, and then we'll do some a little bit later. The other trick we use is we actually divide them. So if you divide a plant, it sets it back by about 2 or 3 weeks. So we divide them. I can take cuttings. If I take a cutting for one of those chrysanthemums, it sets it back 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So by having a mixture of cuttings, divisions, clipping back, I can get this incredible. Now it's not really what gardeners will do, but as a nursery, I want to have the longest length of flowering I can manage.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but these are tricks you can do in the garden if you've got the time.
And if you have a luxury, I think, and this is a luxury today with most people not having big gardens, but if you have the luxury of a plot where you can actually line some of these chrysanthemums out, you can actually lift them just as they're about to come into flower and put them in the garden wherever you want, providing you water them well beforehand and you puddle them in afterwards, and hopefully do it on a dull day as well. So they don't flag too much. But I mean, they are very useful plants.
Yeah, because you lift the whole thing. If you try and divide it, it's hopeless. But if you lift the whole clump, you can, like a hellebore. A hellebore, so you can lift a whole hellebore. You can just lift the whole thing and plonk it somewhere else, and it doesn't mind in the slightest. So chrysanthemums are like that. But obviously, if it's got too big and starts to break apart when you move it, then that's not quite so good. And you can also pot them up and enjoy them nearer the house.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I love these sections of the podcast. I love it when we just get stuck into things that I just would never know unless we sat down and talked like this. So thank you. It's great. It's just what it exists for, introducing us to plants and how to grow them. So perfect. What a wonderful.
Do you want some more? Do you want Thordis' favourite chrysanthemum?
Yes. Well, let's keep them coming. I just love it.
Yeah.
This
is the most stunning colour. It's got pinks, it's got coppers, it's got oranges. Fully double pom-pom, totally hardy, Dr Tom Parr. Dr Tom Parr. It is one of my favourite varieties for this incredible colour changing that goes on in the flower, because some varieties just start one colour and stay one colour. But this is why I like Esther so much, because of these colour changes that go on in it. So that's Dr Tom Parr. And then we've got one that does stay pretty much the Thordis liked this one so much last year she bought it. This is one that, Alan, you said you did grow, which is Julie Peterson.
Julia Peterson.
Julia Peterson. I got it as Julie, but it doesn't really matter. With very small, fully double flowers in the most intense magenta.
The thing about that is she has small flowers, but the colour is so intense.
The colour is incredible. I mean, you're walking around and it just gets your eye as you're walking around the place because it's such a strong colour. And that's one with one colour, but equally dramatic as Dr Tom Parr.
And Dr Tom Parr almost, particularly on the screen, but it's almost got like a zinnia, one of those like little pom-pom zinnia type qualities about those pom-pom flowers. But I think you really do need to see it in real life to appreciate all the tonal qualities of those pom-poms.
And it's small and it's neat, so you can fit it in your garden somewhere.
Now this variety just coming up reminds me of a tale. I'll tell you it in a minute. You tell us.
Go on, tell.
Well, do you remember years ago when I think they were known as pot mums?
Yes.
Chrysanthemums were treated with a dwarfing agent, and they were grown in pots, and you'd had 4 or 5 cuttings around the edge of a pot, and they were just forced into flower, and they were about 5 or 6 inches tall, and all the rest of it. Somebody came to my house one evening and they brought this as a present, a pot mum, and I just thought, what do you think you're coming to, please?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I have respect for anything that's alive, and so I couldn't chuck it away. So what I did was I planted it behind a fence in the garden where nobody had to look at it. And of course, the next couple of years, the dwarfing agent stopped working and the plant became its natural self. And it ended up looking very, very much like the plant that you have in your hand today, with slightly spoon-shaped petals.
Yeah, the one I'm waving is called Shining Light.
Yep.
And it's the most amazing quilled yellow-petaled plant. It's relatively new. It's quite tall, so it's going to be 90 centimeters, 3 feet, or possibly even a meter without any problem.
Yeah.
But the flower shape and quality is really quite good, and of course it looks very dramatic in the garden. It's such an intense yellow. But I know
don't you think, Joe, that there's going to be an awful lot of interest in plants with unusual shaped petals? I mean, we've got, there's nothing wrong with the ones that we've got already. They're all lovely, but I mean, some of the the ones that I see and I like are spoon-shaped petals like that, and if they could be slightly longer and curving, that would be even better. We've got those in tender ones, but not in hardy ones at the moment.
We've got all those characters in the tender ones, but the characters have not been moved over to the hardy ones. So the
other thing I'd like to see is some of the messy petals that go hither and yon, and they just look like kind of a punk hairstyle.
Yeah, they may not stand up to the weather though. That's a slight issue there with those, because the ones within. I've got one because she was one of the famous Irish primrose ladies. This is Gladys Emerson, and this is a show variety. It will be 6-7 feet tall, no problem. The flowers can be as big as your head if you let them, and they start off this sort of soft orange color and then get more and more creamy yellow as time goes by. And they will have these amazing incurved petals, but really, it's not a plant for cold, wet English winter. So they can look a mess. Once the wet gets into them, they can start getting botrytis in the flower, and they don't look nice. But if somebody could get a slightly wilder look, but with the same thing, I know what you're talking about. That would be good. And as long as it's hardy, then we're good. But there's one called burnt orange as well. You know that one, Alan?
Yeah.
Burnt orange, which has got it's like the Shining Light, but it's got orangey red on the outside and yellow on the inside.
Yeah.
This is a really old, very well established, if you like, traditional variety. And this is another one that shows the most amazing color range. So it's starting late. So we're at the beginning of November. It's just starting, and it starts off with peachy colors, pinky colors. It changes through to white. And then as it goes over, right at the end of the season, it goes back to being pink again. But it will flower all the way till Christmas. This is called Wedding Day. And it starts now, but it will still, every year I do a Christmas Day flower count. And I walk around and I work out what's still in flower on Christmas Day. And this is always a reliable flower on Christmas Day. It will always be in flower.
What a shame that people don't get bought things like that rather than some awfully named rose.
Well, and as Alan was saying with the chrysanthemums, that the pot mums, I mean, they're all grown under short day lengths of flower when they're really, really small. And I did exactly the same. I bought one because, it's this high, it looks pretty. Put it in the garden. And it turned into the biggest, most floppy monster with terrible because they're not grown for outdoor use. It's like 10 feet tall and flopping everywhere. They're not grown for outdoor use. They're grown to be sold this high. Who cares what it actually does in real life? Which is probably what you found, Alan, when you were doing it.
I did absolutely that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did. I liked mine enough to keep it.
Yeah, I think mine departed because it wasn't hardy, but that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So I'm not prepared to go on struggling with stuff that is a waste of time. It's all got to survive outdoors. If it doesn't survive outdoors, then there's no point in me doing it.
Exactly.
If I, it's like I always say, if I can't kill it, then when I sell it to you, I know you can't kill it. So I do my best to kill everything, just to make sure that you can't.
Wedding Day was a little reminiscent of Milkshake. Do you have Milkshake too? Or you definitely sell it?
Milkshake here.
Milkshake's a lovely one.
It's lovely. I believe it's a seedling that turned up at the nursery, and I believe it's a child of Wedding Day. But it flowers about a month earlier, and it goes through lots of the same color changes, but it's much more free flowering. It's a much bigger plant. And I thought it was worth naming, so I did.
Got kind of a greeny center as well.
Yes, exactly, yes. And there's one or two varieties selected for this greeny center. The one which I haven't got here, which is called Gold Green Heart. And then there's a new series which people have crossed the garden chrysanthemums, or should we say the greenhouse chrysanthemums, with wild species. And they've then started to get the most amazing characters across as a result. And one of those is the green chrysanthemums that you see everywhere. The green ones are actually they're properly bred using a wild species onto the cultivated ones. And through time, they've ended up with these most amazing green flowers and green centers. So you can use mutation breeding, or you can just find a species and then cross them and try and get the characters in that way. And all those things are possible. But there's a lot of money in chrysanths, so somebody's prepared to spend that time and effort on them to create new stuff. And I'm not sure whether my Etna that I waved at the beginning, the Etna, I don't know if that is the result of some massive greenhouse program and somebody's just snitched it and put it in the gardens and rechristened it. I don't know. I have no idea. But, I'm enjoying growing it. So.
And I mean, I'm assuming so people who don't grow chrysanthemums will know them predominantly as being a massive component in cut flowers, particularly sort of mass-produced bunches of flowers. I'm assuming all of these cut pretty well as well.
Yeah, of course they do. Yeah. And they last a long time. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's the vase life. I do wonder whether, and I mean, I said this on the radio the other day, I kind of feel like chrysanthemums are their own undoing, that their vase life and how wonderful they are as a cut flower means they have ended up being associated with garage forecourts. And so people, they kind of have the wrong associations. They should be celebrated for the fact that they're such good plants and have such great vase life.
Well, I've got a vase in my back hall, on the table in my back hall, and it's been there for nearly 2 weeks, and it's looking, as dare I say, as fresh as a daisy. But I mean, they are wonderful. I mean, I just love them.
Well, they're so easy to grow as well. I mean, this is a shame. I mean, they're very easy to grow, full sun, possibly not really, really dry, sort of average full sun is no problem whatsoever. And they just look after themselves. They don't seem to get, we've talked about eelworm. There's a leaf spot they can get, earwigs in the flower, but that's not really an issue for these ones because, it's the big exhibition ones that have an earwig problem. Minor problems. Very rarely do you get this chrysanthemum white rust. It's normally a problem in greenhouses, not a problem outside, but very, very rarely I see it outside. So generally they're pretty trouble-free and easy to grow. So it's, more people need to grow them because they're, good value. And as you say, Alan, in your garden, they must look spectacular right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully, this
Monksilver connecting to audio.
Hopefully, this will all work.
There he is.
So webcam.
Oh. So, well, now
we've been functioning fine.
Never straightforward, is it? It should be so straightforward.
No, it should be straightforward.
Well, shall we just try restarting the computer?
Yeah, okay. Well, shall we do that then? I'm sorry about this.
That's all right. It's fine. You restart it. Alan and I will just have a natter.
$5 quid for it then.
No, she didn't.
I'm in where I want to be,
Joe!
which is I'm on the Logitech.
Yes.
Fantastic.
How did you do it? It works.
I put a piece of paper over the camera on the computer. It's the best solution to the old ones, aren't they? Just
say that about people too, Joe.
I mean, I always say you should be able to fix everything with some string and a few nails. Anything, including cars and computers.